If you run anything other than a 9-inch axle, commercial or military axles, or Toyota style axles, you probably have to deal with a differential cover, known as a diff cover for short. A diff cover is simply a sealed cover that you bolt onto the back of the axle housing that allows access to the gears and carrier. For a mild trail rig, expedition rig, or mall crawler, a diff cover really doesn't mean that much. But for a real rock crawler, a good diff cover should be part of your build plan. For a real rock crawler, you basically have a choice between, aluminum diff covers, stamped steel diff covers, fabricated steel diff covers, and cast diff covers. In this video, we'll discuss these various types of diff covers and their advantages and disadvantages to the rock crawler. The classic OEM diff covers are stamped steel like this one. These covers are cheap and easy to make. They're lightweight, and you can get them all day at salvage yards for about $5, or get a brand new one like this one for $25. The drawbacks to a stamped steel diff cover is that they can dent during hard impacts with rocks, and the outer bolt lip can easily bend and peel back when you drag your axle across rocks. Most of them are strong enough for mild off-roading, so don't go out and buy yourself a $150 fabricated diff cover. If you still need gears, lockers, chromoly axle shafts, or a stronger tie rod, do that first. This is low down on the priority list if you aren't wheeling that hard anyway. But once you get your 4x4 to the point where you're ready to tackle tougher trails, it's a great idea to upgrade your diff cover to something else besides a stamped steel cover. Aluminum diff covers have always been popular among the full-size truck crowd. Most of the bro-dozers like them because of the looks, and most of the real tow rigs like them because the material and design of those aluminum covers dissipate heat better and keep the axle cooler while under the strain of towing heavy loads. But about 10 years ago, aluminum covers worked their way into the off-road world. Initially, they were met with open arms by rock crawlers because aluminum is strong, lightweight, and works great as a heat sink. But within a couple of years, rock crawlers found that the aluminum covers wore down pretty quickly in the rocks and had lots of deflection that can cause leaks, and in some cases would even crack on hard impacts. Another disadvantage of aluminum diff covers is that you can't weld brackets or braces to them. Aluminum diff covers have proven to be strong enough for the tasks, but they frequently leak because they flex a lot and they tend to expand and contract a lot with heat, which cause them to leak. As of today, aluminum diff covers aren't very popular in the rock crawling world anymore. Fabricated diff covers are produced by forming and welding together various pieces of mild steel plates. They're many times stronger and more rigid than a stamped steel cover, but also cost about 5 times more. Other than strength, the fabricated cover also has the advantage of being easily weldable. So if you want to add a ram mount or truss support to the diff cover, this is the diff cover you want to use. The drawback to fabricated diff covers is quality inconsistency. These things are basically made by hand, and humans are nowhere near as perfect and consistent as a machine or mold are. I've seen $200 fabricated diff covers that leak at the welds and have bad mating surfaces on the back. I've seen $150 fabricated diff covers that had a warped bolt ring. I've seen fabricated diff covers where the bolt holes don't line up perfectly on the housing. So if you want a strong diff cover that you can easily weld on if you need to, a fabricated diff cover is the clear answer. Just be mindful that it may not be perfect. Cast iron and cast steel diff covers have gradually become a favorite among rock crawlers. These are made by casting high-strength ductile iron or steel into a mold. Basically, this is made out of the same stuff that aftermarket knuckles are made out of. After casting, the mating surfaces are CNC machined to a perfectly flat surface. The cast cover is strong, and the dimensions seem to be always true on these covers. And as an added bonus, most of these covers have recessed bolt holes to protect the bolt heads from damage. The only disadvantage to a cast diff cover is that they're the heaviest covers. And cast iron, if it's cast iron, is also very difficult to put good welds on. Most of the rock bouncers I've seen lately seem to have gravitated towards the cast diff cover. So that should tell you something. I've been using the Riddler brand diff covers for many years now and never had an issue with one of them. They can take a lot of abuse, they always seal well, and they protect the bolt heads to some degree. If you're unsure what diff cover to buy, you can't go wrong with a cast diff cover. There are various ways to seal a diff cover, and unfortunately, all of them have their pros and cons. RTV sealant is the classic tried and true method of sealing a diff cover, but it must be applied carefully and perfectly in order to get an adequate seal. The real downside to RTV sealant is that it'll start leaking if your diff cover shifts or flexes during hard impacts. But RTV sealant is cheap, readily available, and it flat out works if you set it up right. This stuff has been used forever. You can, the Permatex Ultra Black is probably the most widely used. The right stuff is the strongest readily available sealant to use on your diff. If you have imperfect mating surfaces or don't have a lot of time to wait for the sealant to set up and cure, the right stuff will do the job perfectly. This stuff seals better than any other sealant I've ever used. And, it's the only thing I've ever used that I think that has never leaked. It doesn't break down as easily as RTV, and it's not as sensitive to mating surfaces like a lube locker gasket is. But its downside is that it almost works too good. This stuff is a pain in the ass to scrape off when you open your diff back up. I've seen people badly gouge the diff mating surfaces attempting to scrape this stuff off. But, I find that a wire wheel on low speed takes it off pretty fast without damaging the mating surface. So it's usable. But just be mindful that, this stuff is great if you plan on leaving your diff sealed for a long time, but it could be a real pain in the ass if you plan on opening up your diff frequently to inspect gears and do maintenance, like you would if you were racing or something like that. And that brings us to the lube locker gasket. The lube locker is heavily marketed in the off-road community, and they seem to sponsor many professional drivers. But don't let that hype confuse your judgment. These things are real hit and miss in my opinion. Sometimes they work great, seal perfectly, and can even be used more than once. Other times, you won't be able to keep them, from leaking no matter what the hell you do. These need an absolutely perfect mating surface and perfectly torqued bolts in order to work good. That's why many people with junkyard axles can't get these things to seal worth a damn. I really want them to work because they do make life easy when they do work. But, don't set your expectations too high when you fork over the cash for one of these, because in my experience, you have about a 50-50 chance of it sealing your diff for the long term. Another thing to be mindful of is a lot of these diff covers have these really handy dandy fill plugs on them, and that's okay. Just make sure that these fill plugs are either high enough to where they're not going to cause an issue for you, or they're recessed down deep into the diff cover so they don't get damaged on rocks. This Moto-Built fabricated diff cover, you can see right here, you've seen my diff covers in the way I wheel. If I put this on my rock buggy, I would absolutely destroy this. You know, this fill plug would probably be unusable after one trip in my rock buggy. So, you know, on a diff cover like this, it'd be better not to have this drain plug. You know, a diff cover like this is probably more geared towards your guy in a bro dozer or a bro truck, or maybe even a tow rig or something like that, or maybe even a Jeep. But I definitely wouldn't put this cover on my rock buggy, because I'd either smash this in and it would start leaking fluid through the threads on this, or I'd booger up the outside of it so bad I'd never be able to get a hex wrench in there to ever take it off. So just be mindful of that. And as you can see here, this is a drain plug done right. You know, not only is the fill plug up high and out of the way of the rocks more, but it's also recessed in to the diff cover itself to protect it. So if you're going to have a fill plug on a diff cover, make sure it's not going to hit the rocks. You know, in reality, if it's a rock buggy or a serious crawler, you're probably better off getting a diff cover that doesn't have a fill plug in it at all. As you can see right here, here's my diff cover after one day of wheeling in Johnson Valley. You know, could you imagine having a fill plug right there? That thing wouldn't last long. What you should be taking away from this video is that there's no perfect diff cover or perfect way to seal a diff cover. Stamped steel covers are weak. Aluminum covers leak when abused. Fabricated covers sometimes have quality issues. And cast iron covers are heavy and hard to weld to. For a rock crawler, I recommend a fabricated cover if you need to weld things onto it, and a cast cover if you don't. Well, I hope you enjoyed my video, and hit subscribe if you want to be notified when I post more content. And as always, thanks for watching, and keep the rubber side down.